This is the Coder Kids podcast, episode number 11, actually. So
Episode number 11.
we're firmly into the double digits, so I'm
We'll
very
see
excited
if we
about
make
that.
it. See if we make it to 20.
Yeah, and the triple digits, that'll be exciting. So eventually, right? So I'm James Thornack, as always. I run the Coder Kids online operations and our in-person stuff in Houston, and this is Jeff Ward, the founder and CEO. Great guy.
Hello, it's me, Jeff.
So we start off as always, with the topic. So today we're going to be talking about, essentially what is a PC and what do you need to know if you want to build one. Roughly speaking, disclaimer: we're not super experts at this, but it is something that's fun to talk about. And if you don't know that much about computers, it'll help you feel a lot smarter by the end.
Yeah, if you don't know that much about computers, then we're going to seem like we're very smart.
But if you do know about computers, we may not
We're going to seem
as smart.
We're going to seem middle of the road.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to seem just like you. So, we'll see.
So, Jeff, as always, what is going on with your house? I see a printer in the background.
Well,
Making some progress.
You can see if you're watching YouTube, you can see I got some flooring down in this room. There is no trim on the walls, and there's a printer here. I guess the big update for me is that I go to this CrossFit gym here in Bountiful, Utah, and we are doing a gallon challenge this month to drink a gallon of water a day, stay really hydrated. So I might have to take some bathroom breaks during the podcast.
Wow. Okay. Well,
it just started today.
Good.
So I mean, it should have started yesterday, but I'm drinking already a lot more than I usually drink. So.
Well, that is different than other gallon challenges that I've heard of, like milk and other substances. So.
Yeah, it's a wellness gallon.
It's
challenge
a wellness.
To a opposite of wellness.
Yeah.
Challenge. So.
Well, thank goodness.
James, what's the latest? What's the latest on your end?
Yeah. So for me, I've been for those again on YouTube. For those of you who can't see it, I've made just this little goal sheet here, and I've got just little things on it, and so I'm taking the Japanese approach. Well, not the Japanese approach, but there is one Japanese approach where you do something for 10 minutes, and you're just trying to build the habit. And the idea is if you just do 10 minutes, you'll likely just keep doing more of that thing. So that's the philosophy that I'm going off of. And I've been wanting to read some more scriptures. And so I just have 2 verses. I got to read 2 verses, which is basically like takes 30 seconds. And so
I was wondering if that took you 10 minutes. If you're a very slow reader.
Yeah, oh goodness. Well,
very methodical.
It can if you start talking about it, right? And so if you limit yourself to a certain amount of like just a paragraph essentially, which is what that is, then you actually have to think about it. And so sometimes if you actually like place arbitrary limits, it causes more thought sometimes. So I've been enjoying that. Another one's diet, another one's just like a bedtime thing, and then exercise for 8 minutes. And again, like that's nothing, right? It's not being awesome at CrossFit, but I have felt, so I've done it for the past 4 days and I feel way better. And it's like 8 minutes.
That's good.
It's like jogging around the house and doing push-ups and squats and jumping jacks, and I have my baby up on my shoulders when I'm doing squats. So that's always adds that extra weight.
You can be outside year-round if you can stand the heat in the summer.
And pollen, so that's the other thing. Ragweed 2.0 is out, and so I'm indoors whenever possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the personal update. Just kind of, I'm trying to improve myself.
Update.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like we're both working on personal wellness, I guess, in this time of COVID still existing, impacting coder kids. We're just working on self improvement
Yeah. And it's
because
same thing.
we're not like so slammed with business stuff. So
Yeah, and as far as Coder Kids goes, I mean, we have some interesting and exciting stuff going on at the back end that's going to be revealed a little bit closer to Christmas time, and so stay tuned for that. But we're working even when we don't have to. There's a lot of cool stuff that is like classes and things. That's kind of the area that we'll kind of reveal later. But the gears are always turning. They're
gears are turning. Keep on
so
turning those gears, James. Get your exercise and your religion and stuff.
That's right. Exercise, religion, and sleep. That's all you need, right? So let's jump into the topic here, which
All right.
is building computers. There's lots to talk about. There's more than we can cover today. So this is just like surface level.
I mean,
I'm gonna
yeah,
try to stay at the surface level. No
yeah.
guarantees.
I want to say that I just recently built a computer.
Okay.
I think on the last podcast episode I was talking about how I was going to build it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and so I guess I'm probably less than a week in, but it's been nice. It's nice that it moves smoothly. It's running fast. Um, have a solid processor in there, so it's been good so far. Um,
Have you measured like the boot time? How long it takes,
I
like from
mean
when you press the
it's
power button to when it?
I mean it's pretty negligible. It's almost nothing.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean it pops up, but I mean, bam, it's yeah, it's pretty much nothing. So I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's like absolutely nothing,
but it's like
but
under a
it's
minute. It's
you know,
it's
as a
pretty.
child of the '80s, it's like who even cares anymore? Yeah, it's definitely under a minute. I mean,
Yeah.
it's probably under 15 seconds.
Well, I'm not gonna test it here, but like last time I
Yeah,
tested, I think.
let's reboot.
Yeah, no, I'm recording, but I think it's about 40 seconds for me. If I disable like all my startup apps, then
Yeah,
it's then it's
well,
a little bit faster. But and
that's the
that's
other
with
great thing about
everything
a new
logged in,
computer.
3 monitors, everything. So
New computer. I've got no startup apps. It's pretty nice.
nice.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's
So
also nice to like not buy your computer from. I guess this is another topic we can talk about, but like
yeah,
when you buy your computer from HP, you buy your computer from Dell, it comes with all this. I mean, we call it bloatware, but it
yeah.
just comes with all these apps, all this stuff that like
Candy
you don't
Crush,
need.
Peggle.
Yeah,
HP
and
has
like
like yeah.
I just got this computer. I put Windows on it, and literally the only stuff that comes on it is the stuff that Windows puts on it, which is still probably more than I'd like, but it's pretty it's pretty slim. Um, so it's still booting up pretty fast for now until I opt to put in the bloatware. Um, so anyway, yeah, it's good, but I guess the topic is really like um, what are we um, we're talking about like building your own desktop. Is that what
Yeah.
it comes down to?
Yeah.
So maybe you already said that.
No, no, that's
Yeah,
fine. Yeah, so
building your own desktop.
there are different parts to a computer. Basically, I'm trying to sum down what is a computer at the most basic level. It's something that takes electricity, right? And it's basically a digital brain that figures out computational problems, and then it gives you an output, and it takes input. And that's what a computer is. Like
Well,
at the
James, let me
yeah.
ask you this question. In your opinion, why would and we had a whole show on laptops, but why would a parent consider building a desktop for their child or having their child like build their own desktop? Just off the top of your head, like what are some thoughts on like why maybe they should build a desktop and have a desktop instead of just buying them a laptop?
Yeah, I mean, tons of benefits. The main one is simply cost, right? The cost per performance. We talked about this last time, but it's unrivaled if you do it yourself. Even if you buy a pre-built, um, the cost is lower than buying a laptop. And right now, there's definitely a laptop shortage. We're selling some of our laptops, but when it comes down to it, the speed that you're getting in a laptop and it's not nearly as good as it could be. In addition, there's things like creativity, like for you as a parent or your kid to be able to invite your friends over and say, "Hey, I built this." Like that's so cool, right? I had my granddad. He built a car. It was like a kit car, and it was a stick shift, and it was hot rod red, and it was the coolest thing because like my granddad built that sucker. Plus, it was a cool car, but and it took him about like I think 15 years because it was like just a so building a PC doesn't take that long, but yeah, there's that investment. Like I did that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think along that same line, especially for a kid, to go in and like if you say, "Hey, here's the parts," um, go put it together, then it takes some reading, it takes some study, it takes some YouTube videos. But I think it's a great project for a kid to work on, especially if you. I mean, there are ways out there that you could literally build all the parts of a desktop computer for like $400. So,
Or
um,
200 or 100. Yeah.
yeah, I
Any
mean,
price point. That's the awesome thing. Sorry to interrupt. Like
yeah,
literally any price point. If you have $100, if you have $200, if you have $500, if you have $7,000. Now, the most I'd probably recommend spending on a computer total would be like two and a half, three. If you want just an absolute hot rod, screaming fast computer for like video editing, but if you're not producing super technical models for the aerospace industry, I'd say you're pretty good spending under 500.
yeah,
So, and we'll talk
yeah,
about prices kind of going into it later, but
yeah, and so anyway, yeah, we can go ahead and dive in. But I do think it's a fun project for a kid to build, especially in these times of COVID. Like I said, I just built a desktop, didn't have any trouble finding or getting component parts. Laptops are kind of in high demand right now, so um, if you are the kind of person that doesn't need the mobility of a laptop, and most kids really don't, um, then go for building a cheap desktop and let them build it and have some fun with it. So, all right, diving into the topics
yeah,
here. Let's start with really a pretty crucial component of a computer, and that is the processor.
we got to start
Now,
with the motherboard though, right?
I mean, the motherboard is the thing that the processor goes into.
That's right.
So, yeah, we can start with the motherboard.
So I just like that they call it mother. Like it's not the fatherboard. It's the motherboard. I like it. I don't know. I like it. So everything lives and connects to the motherboard. Um, Kind of like the mothership, I guess. I don't know. So the board
Yeah, it's
is
the
the
mothership.
P. It's called a PCB, but you don't need to know that. But everything connects into it. All of the other parts are going to go on this board. In fact, you don't actually need a PC case even. Some people stick motherboards on their wall. Like their PC just lives on their wall. Um, so there are lots of ways to do it and lots of creative things that you can do. But um, yeah, so I'd say the motherboard is like the kind of the skeleton of the build or the frame that everything goes into. So
Yeah, yeah, and building out my computer, this is like the thing that I had to find. So like when you buy a case, it has a lot of it has some external ports, like a USB port or a power button. You have to find the place where that goes on the motherboard and connect it in. Um, it also holds the CPU. The hard drive runs into the motherboard. The RAM is on the motherboard. Like everything that we're going to talk about, it's all based around the motherboard. I would say the main things that for me I was looking for with a motherboard is like multi-display support. So you probably want it to be able to put out uh, more than one like display ability. Um,
I have a
there's
caveat to
workaround
that, but yeah.
there's workarounds like on my laptop I hooked in HDMI into USB-C and that worked just fine. Um, so there are definitely workarounds, but um, that's one thing you might look at. And we were talking about previously the what do we call it? The rear panel connectors of a motherboard.
Yeah.
So it comes with all these different little slots that you can stick different things into: HDMI, USB, Ethernet. Uh, Mine comes with like an external Wi-Fi antenna, and then also like headphone jacks and things like that.
Yeah.
All right, James, go ahead. Let's talk about your caveats and whatnot.
Oh, just the caveat with the multiple displays. Like all my displays come out of my graphics card. So
Oh, right,
yeah, so
right.
if you're gonna buy
That's
a graphics card, then you don't need to worry
very
about
good.
multi-display. But that's the only caveat I had. Everything else
That's
is
right. Yeah. So I when I built this computer, I opted to not get a graphics card, partially because I'm interested in the 3070 card that's coming out in less than a month. Um, so I kind of want to see how that goes. Um, I was interested in 3080, but that's been kind of a mess. So the
3092.
30, I can't afford the 3090. So anyway, I'm interested in 3070, um, but for now, working with kind of more of a bare bones computer without a GPU, the motherboard plays a part in multi-display functionality.
Yeah,
So
so let's jump into the CPU like you wanted to. So the CPU is the brain of the operation. I think everybody calls it the brain. That's what it is. Um,
the nucleus, if you
yeah,
will.
it's the thing that does all of the work in in a computer. Well, not all of the work, but most of it, right? Um, and there are other components. So how strong your CPU is going to be how fast your computer feels, roughly speaking. Um, RAM plays into that and some other things, but the CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. So pretty straightforward stuff. Not that complicated. It's just a series of ones and zeros that it computes. A series of switches that either are on or off, and that's how it stores. How it does all of the math equations. That's all it does.
And it goes crazy, crazy fast.
And that speed produces heat. So you're going to have to get some kind of a CPU cooler. Usually one comes with it. But you have to cool that thing off. Otherwise, it will fry. I actually saw a video where somebody fried a little Wagyu steak on a CPU. It was kind of cute. Uh,
Well, I will say this. The what was I gonna say? Uh, James, help me out because I lost my train of thought.
yeah, no. So CPUs are great. There are two major brands. There's AMD's Ryzen chips and Intel's i3, i5, i7, i9 chips.
Yeah,
So, and Xeon, but we don't need to talk about those. So the higher the number, the better it is typically with computer parts and the naming. So one of the worst things about PC building is the naming schemes are terrible. Like it takes some getting used to. Um,
well, yeah, I actually pulled up this page because I actually went with an Intel processor. James uh, went with AMD processor. The reason I went with Intel, honestly, and I watched a lot of videos,
mhm.
and I read some blog posts and things. Um, at the present moment, the absolute like moment when I bought, Intel was Intel actually does have the top processor, um, according to all the benchmark websites. And benchmarks are going to be different for gaming and general like work processing. So AMD, it seems like, might have a slight edge in gaming, although the i9 10900 um, is supposedly the top one for both work and gaming. Um, but anyway, long story short, so I did a lot of research on Intel versus AMD. Really, I think it comes down to preference. They are slightly different. You're going to need slightly different motherboard, um, so slightly different like layouts. Like I know my motherboard is like Intel. It's like designed for Intel products. Um, but you can, I mean, the truth is you can get a really great CPU on either AMD or Intel. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And they're getting better every year, right? So Moore's law is still in effect. There's still shrinking transistors and increasing compatibility and speed and all of that. Yeah, I mean, I have so just to go into it a little bit. So Ryzen also has the Ryzen 3, Ryzen 5, 7, and 9, and they have fancy numbers after those to denote the. So the higher the number, the more likely that is the current generation. Right now they're on the 3000s, so you don't need to know. But basically, the price
But they're
range,
releasing the five.
yeah,
That's what I heard. The 5000s are coming up soon.
they're skipping the
So
4000s.
yep, that's right. That's what I
Dumb,
heard.
dumb. Naming conventions, they're not good. Sorry, guys. But yeah, they're about to release the fifth gen. I have a Ryzen 7 2700X, and basically, if you want to know the kind of workload that CPU does, I can record 4K video at 60 frames a second at an incredibly high quality, and it also outputs, and if I am exporting a video, if I'm producing a video, it exports extremely quickly compared to other CPUs. It's still one of the best on the market. So don't feel like you need to buy the biggest, the best, the shiniest one. I bought Ryzen because at the time that I purchased it, which was, I guess, about a year ago, Intel was about $50 more expensive for doing basically the same thing, and there wasn't as much in stock. And so I went with Ryzen. I've never regretted it. It's been really good. So
Yeah,
um, yeah.
yeah.
So
That's kind of the crazy thing is that you've got these two chip makers that are basically like in parallel. They're like,
yeah,
and you're right. Like you can, I mean, even looking the chip that I ultimately landed on is called the i7 10700K, and basically, um, there are AMD processors. The Ryzen 9 3900 is almost exactly the same, like almost exactly the same.
pretty
And
remarkable. Yeah.
when the Ryzen 5 comes out, it's supposed to beat the i9 10900 by 12% or something. But like ultimately, you're gonna it's gonna move fast, and really I mean, I hate to say this, but to simplify it for people, if you really just want to go out and like we were saying, build the component parts for your child or for yourself to just have a small desktop at home, um, ultimately I feel like as long as you're buying from a reputable seller, you can really just go on price for a lot of this.
Yeah.
Like if you want the new, like the absolute high end that I was looking at, the i9 10900 was coming in at I think around 650. The i7 10700, which I landed on, is only slightly worse than the i9 10900, and it was about $400.
Yeah, there's this
So
law of diminishing returns, right?
yeah, and then we can go all the way down to like when I was looking, there were processors that are perfectly good that are like $100, $150.
Yeah.
So you don't have to spend $400. My mindset was like I don't want to have to upgrade this for 5, 6, 7 years. So
And
that's why I kind of got one that was pretty close to the top of the market right now.
yeah, so let me just describe real quick what a CPU even does. As we're 25 minutes into the podcast, so what a CPU also it not only does all of the kind of logic work of the computer, like I talked about before, but it also processes video, any kind of visual thing that's happening on the screen. Um, we can jump into the GPU probably a little bit later, but that has to do with video games and 3D rendering and applications with AutoCAD and video games and things like that. But the CPU, what's interesting, there are some components that can be upgraded without upgrading your entire operating system and kind of starting over from scratch. The CPU is not one of those. So like if you get a new CPU, you're going to have to start over, like in terms of software, in terms of downloading applications, in terms of setting up Windows. And so, you know,
And you're gonna need a new
yeah,
motherboard also. Is that
yeah,
right?
yeah. So motherboard and CPU kind of have to match. They kind of go hand in hand. Yeah.
But
So,
like I can't just go into my motherboard and pop off the CPU, right?
I mean,
And
you
like pop a new
can, but
CPU on.
there's only a handful of compatible CPUs. And usually by the time it takes you to upgrade, there's a
Time to just
better.
get a new motherboard
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
very rare to not do that. But
But it is possible to basically like replace your motherboard and your CPU, and then all the other parts are pretty universal.
yeah, and that's the great thing about Windows versus Mac, right? Is you can upgrade an individual part and nothing else changes and everything else works fine.
Yeah,
Um
yeah.
and you just turn it off, you do that and you turn it on and that's it. You don't need permission from anybody. It's great. It's awesome. So, let's see. I want to cover RAM really quickly. It doesn't take a lot of time to cover RAM, but basically RAM stands for random access memory. What that basically means, it's kind of like imagine you have too many calendar events for a day and you can't remember everything, so you pull out a little paper calendar and you jot down when you have different meetings in the day, or you have that app on your phone and it's your calendar app and you schedule everything. You don't have enough kind of working memory to always remember exactly the moment everything happens, so you kind of store it to the side. That's exactly what random access memory is. It's not as soon as you turn your computer off. Well, this changes, but it used to be when you turn the computer off, that memory just it wiped itself. There's nothing there anymore. It's
Right.
short-term memory. Think about Dory, right? Um, that's really useful if you want to do multiple things at the same time. So, if you're a stay at home mom, you know how to pick up a baby and change a baby and to be singing at the same
James is giving
time.
us a lot of analogies right now.
Trying to break it down for the people.
Well, I'm just saying,
So,
look, I think the easiest way to think about RAM, in my opinion, is multiple Chrome tabs open. I
that's
mean,
it. Yeah,
I
that's true. Yeah.
I am like the master of having 50 Chrome tabs at the same time that are going.
It's
And
true, people.
on an older computer with worse RAM, you're going to struggle to the computer is going to struggle to keep up because it's eating up all that memory. It's trying to remember all the different things that are in all those different tabs. Um, but if you have enough RAM, if you have sufficient RAM, it just it just
Yeah, it
is
doesn't matter.
capable
Yeah.
of holding more. Yeah,
And same
it's
thing
not
with
going to slow down your
applications.
computer.
Yeah, no, definitely the Chrome is a great example of that. I'm going to just plug the Brave browser because it uses way less RAM. But anyway, yeah, any browser is going to use up RAM. That's just facts. If you have a lot of different applications open, let's say you have like Photoshop and you have maybe Google Chrome open, maybe have an audio program. If you're any kind of content creator, RAM's going to be very important to you. If you're a gamer, you're going to need some RAM too. So let's talk about kind of minimum recommended specs. I typically recommend in 2020 a minimum of 8 gigabytes of RAM. I don't think you should go below that. You probably could. Probably be fine. It really just depends on what you're doing. If you're just
Yeah,
browsing
I
the
mean,
web, 4 or 8 gigs is okay. If you're just composing an email or two every week, you know, I guess 4 is fine. They don't sell Chromebooks under 4 gigabytes of RAM anymore. So I'd
yeah,
recommend as a
definitely
minimum 8, probably.
don't do 2. That would be a mistake.
I don't
Um,
know if that's even possible to buy like 2 gigabyte RAM
I
sticks
mean, if you
anymore.
buy one of these like older computers, yeah,
Yeah,
I don't,
yeah.
on a
I
in a
mean, I don't
desktop
even think you can
setting, I
anymore.
don't think
Yeah.
it's possible.
So,
Unless you're buying something way, way, way outdated, and really you don't even need to buy it. Like you would probably just find that on the side of the road. But anyway,
there's also RAM speed.
yeah. So RAM speed, I've read has some level of importance, but at the same time, the processor dictates a maximum capacity of RAM speed. This is what I was reading anyway. So like for
Mm-hmm.
example, you could buy something that is like 32 gigs of it's like 2 sticks of 16 um, gigs of RAM memory,
Mm-hmm.
but it'll have the 3200 connotation after the 16 gigs, but basically like you're kind of limited by your CPU chip anyway. So like CPU, the Intel CPU that I bought, it says it's compatible up to like 2688 megahertz of speed. So it's not uh, like you could buy the fastest RAM, but it might not necessarily matter if you don't have a CPU that supports it. And so it kind of they kind of have to go hand in hand. You might look at like you might consider doing that, but that's again pretty technical. I would say just go with something pretty standard on RAM, like get 16 or 32 gigs total, and make sure it's like about 3200 megahertz, and move on. That's like kind of the standard right
Yeah,
now. So
yeah. This podcast is going to outdate itself, I'm sure, in 2 years. But,
yeah, we'll
um,
re-record this in a year from now. So
and so,
um, yeah, let's talk about something that's near and dear to your heart,
oh,
the GPU.
I thought you were going to talk about power supply. I'm just kidding. Yeah, so the GPU is the graphics processing unit, and this has to do with, you guessed it, graphics. So anything that has to do with video games and video game animation, 3D rendering, if you animate in 3D, if you um, recently graphics cards have also some even video editors are able to harness GPUs. So whereas it was strictly a CPU activity before, now they're starting to lean on the some of the strength of GPUs. So that's neat as well. So again, with graphics cards, there are two big companies. AMD is one of them again, and the other is NVIDIA. So NVIDIA, it's not spelled like you think it's spelled. It's a strange spelling, but they're definitely winning the battle. It's a very uneven playing field right now, and NVIDIA has for the past 3 or 4 years been the kind of the king. But AMD is slated to release what's called Big Navi is their name for it, which nobody knows what that means, but it's a name, so there you go. A game again. Engineers don't make the best names. Leave that to the artists, I guess. But yeah, so that's kind of the state right now. Um,
Yeah, I'll talk for a
yeah,
little
go
bit.
ahead. Yeah,
So basically, NVIDIA just released three pretty important, pretty powerful GPUs. These are getting people up to really the top tier of gaming. The 3090 is well, I mean maybe James knows something I don't, but I mean the 3090 is going to be basically the most powerful GPU on the entire market.
yeah.
Um,
hands down.
The 3080 is still really, really strong. I mean, extremely strong GPU. The 3070, as I was mentioning before, is something I'm interested in because it is giving you more performance than the 2080 Ti, which was previously the best GPU on the market, but it's it's about $1,000 cheaper than the 2080 Ti.
Yeah.
So, so the 3070 is a lower end card, but it's going to be pretty awesome GPU for people who want to do gaming. And we're talking about Fortnite and any kind of, I mean, Minecraft. James knows all the different games that people are playing these days.
Sure.
But if you or your child are into any type of gaming, or if you want to be into any type of gaming, then you're going to need a GPU. And NVIDIA right now is the way to go. AMD, like James was mentioning, end of October should have this big Navi out, and I mean, people say it could be faster, but I mean, I don't know.
It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough.
The 3090 is a beast.
I
So
we should also mention price points here. I mean,
yeah,
compared to the CPU, the GPU is way more expensive. I mean, if you spend $250 on a CPU, the 3070, which is the budget pick here, is $500. So
yeah.
eh,
Well, it is the
yeah,
budget pick, but I will say, like,
it's the
if
latest. It's the latest
right,
model of the budget pick. So you
if
could
you want
buy
to
it, yeah.
do, yeah, if you want to do gaming and you really want to go with a budget pick, like you could still go 2070, or you could go
1070 Ti,
1080.
yeah.
Yeah,
You can buy
1070
my
Ti.
card. Yeah, you can buy my card off of me. I have a 1070 Ti.
Yeah, but
And
like, there's
yeah.
still awesome cards.
Yeah, I mean, so my card, for instance, the 1070 Ti, the GTX 1070 Ti, it can run Fortnite at 140 frames, 144 frames a second, which matches up with monitors that can put that out. And so most TVs, for reference, do 60, and most TV shows are like, well, most movies are 24 frames per second. The Hobbit was 60. So if you saw that in the theaters and it looked like a little bit too much like a soap opera, that's because it went 60 frames a second. But
It did look like a soap opera.
yeah. So
I noticed.
my card does that on goodness. Well, it's hard to talk about GPUs without talking about monitors, but the monitor I
Yeah,
have,
we haven't even talked about monitors.
yeah. So
Shoot.
well, we'll go through this quick, but it can push a lot of frames and is more than strong enough for basically anything you need at this point. And I think, end of October into November, I think you're gonna see the GTX 1070 Ti come down to like 300, 350 or something like in that price range. So that should be pretty affordable. I would say another caveat. So the 3090 is like $1,500. For 15% better performance than the 3080. So it's like, it's that card is really only for like insane enthusiasts where money's not an object, or for people who do like a rendering for studios. Like if you're producing The Mandalorian, this is the card for you. Like
Right.
the set of The Mandalorian.
Maybe you want two of them.
Yeah, they're going to have, and you can actually put two in a machine, and for Disney, that's not a big deal, $3,000, whatever, right? And we're producing The Mandalorian, and The Mandalorian, by the way, is in an Unreal Engine, but that's neither here nor there. So graphics cards, you get what you pay for, essentially. But again, the law of diminishing returns. It's better to buy in the middle or in the upper middle, not at the high end.
Yeah.
If money means anything to you. If it doesn't, who cares? Get the. I mean, buy the thing with the highest number on it. I mean, like
James and I are middle class. All right, we're middle class.
So yeah. So
Matt,
that's what it
hey,
looks like. Yeah.
Let's talk for a second about about the power supply. So
Yeah,
basically, we've been naming all these different components: the CPU, the motherboard, the GPU, the hard drive,
we haven't talked about hard drive or RAM. We did talk about RAM.
lighting, cooler. Like all of these different elements of your computer are going to take energy, and basically what the power supply is doing is it's just feeding that energy. The biggest connector goes to the motherboard, which feeds a lot of the energy. Um, I suppose I don't have a GPU, but I suppose that there's probably power supply running directly to the GPU.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the newest graphics cards are they're beasts. They're like 350 watts. They're
yeah,
massive. When a lot of laptops will run on like 45 watts or something. So like
right.
many
So
times
yeah,
less.
so the
They're power
so
hungry.
the total amount of the total amount of power that your computer is generating can be calculated before you build it, and then you basically are going to slap the GPU on there, and that's going to take up probably the majority of the power. The power supply that I got happens to be a 750 watt, which I thought was probably going to be big enough to support everything I've got in it now, plus one GPU when I get it.
Yeah.
I think 750 watts is a pretty reasonable amount of power.
Oh yeah.
I didn't want to go lower than that, but I didn't really see the need to go higher either, unless you're going to have more than one GPU in there. Which we probably the only reason you'd want to do that is if you're like again doing something really high, really intense, or if you're doing mining. We
Yeah.
don't need. Let's not even talk about mining right now.
Save that for another podcast.
So yeah, save it for another
So
one.
yeah, my power supply is 1,000 watts, and it was a gift from a friend. So I was like, thank you. So it was great. But yeah,
Right.
that's pretty straightforward. As far as I kind of want to cover the
Sure.
monitor really quick.
Well, I really want you to talk about before we run out of time. I want you to talk about like because people are looking at your computer, I'm sure, on YouTube,
Oh,
and
it's not my
it's got
computer.
this like jar of
Liquid, yeah.
liquid, and so you should definitely explain to people what's going on there.
Thermals. So a computer, all these components produce heat. So if you're a student of science, the end of every equation, um, that's a chemical process or whatever, will often have heat as the you just have extra heat. And so that's what happens here. There's a lot of work going on. There's a lot of heat that's produced. And so there are different ways to remove the heat. Okay. Similar, actually identical to the way a refrigerator works is you have like a radiator like on the back of it or some kind of cooling system to pull the heat away. And so you'll see a lot of fans in PCs, and those will suck air in and out. And so it's important to have good airflow. An alternative way to cool the PC, and there are primarily two components that need to be cooled: the CPU and the GPU, the things that are really doing the work. And you can also liquid cool them. So more like how your car cools itself, right? Because that car engine runs
Right,
pretty
it's got a
hot.
radiator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, in a similar way, you can liquid cool it. So, you can do lots of things. I've seen some pretty cool videos on YouTube, but there's liquid cooling. People call it water cooling. So, you can water cool it. It works better if you have some kind of coolant. I literally saw someone cool their PC with vodka. He was Russian. So, that was pretty cool. And then
Yeah.
enthusiasts who are like trying to set computational records, they will use liquid nitrogen and I saw a video recently on Gamers Nexus, by the way, so shout out to their YouTube channel. They did a liquid cooled basically benchmark of one of these new graphics cards that was released and set a world record on stream. So that was about the nerdiest way that you can watch
That's
like
cool.
a competition, right? But so there are different ways to cool it, and this is
So
one of
yeah,
the
so
yeah,
yeah. Let me just because we probably should wrap up soon.
sure.
Um, or we could just let James go off about coolant for the
And
next
have a 2 hour pod.
half an
We
hour.
could just be the Joe Rogan length,
Oh man, we would never make it to episode 100 though. I'll tell you that.
but
Um,
he's done thousands,
or-
so yeah.
yeah, I know. Joe Rogan, what a guy. Anyway, so the way that my cooler works, which is like the $40 version, most
Oh yeah.
basic, is basically it's just a metal plate that is put on top of the CPU, and then it has coils running up from the metal plate, and then it has a fan that basically tries to keep those coils cool.
Hmm.
And so, in that sense, it's very much like a refrigerator, like the coils on a refrigerator. But basically, it's just extracting heat onto that metal plate. It runs up the coils, and then the fan cools down the coils. And so, very very basic, but important to keep your CPU temperature low, um, and pretty straightforward to install. Maybe one of the more challenging parts of the installation, but really not too bad. Um, I guess, James, I know you want to talk about monitors.
It's pretty fast. I
What
mean, yeah,
cases?
yeah, yeah. So
No, I
monitors.
was actually going to say I think we should leave it for another time. But if you want to dive into monitors really quick,
It's so yeah. So with
all right.
monitors, you've got HD screens, which you know what that is. 1920 by 1080. That's just the number of pixels. You've got QHD, which is 4 times that. So it's as if you had 4 different HD screens. No. No, it's like it's sometimes called 2K, and then there's 4K. So you can think of HD, 2K, and 4K displays. And so I have a QHD display, but it doesn't matter. And that's what this video is actually being recorded in. So if you're watching it on YouTube, it'll say 1440, and that means QHD. So if you have a 2K screen or whatever, you can click on that button on YouTube and you can see pixel for pixel what I'm recording, right? There's also a refresh rate, and that is simply going to be, it'll either say 30, which would be terrible, like terrible, don't do that.
That's probably what mine is. Yeah, go ahead.
There, there's 60. Occasionally, there's like a 75 and a 90. It's a little bit more rare, but it's still out there. And then you get up to 120, 144, and then 240. I would say really depends on your work case. If you're just using a computer as normal, you don't need anything fancy, go with 60. If um, if you're a gamer, then you got to get a 144 hertz monitor. It's massively upgraded how I play, specifically like Fortnite. Makes a massive difference because there's less work that your eyes have to do. And as far as sizing goes, I mean, it's kind of up to you, but 27 inches diagonally is kind of the standard. Um, and I typically recommend minimum of 2 monitors. I'm a little spoiled. I have 3 monitors. And it just enables me to see a lot at the same time. So that's all I'm going to say about monitors. They're great.
James,
Yeah,
I have a commentary on that, and
sure.
that is that I feel that my productivity has actually increased quite a bit by having one monitor. You
Huh.
remember I used to have like three,
Yeah. I remember that.
but now I just have one, and I think you and I are wired differently, but I mean,
In a lot of ways.
I'm very ADD, and so for me, having one monitor is like it's actually been good. Like I'm still tempted to have two, but I think I might just keep one. I mean, as long as it's big enough. With Windows, you can easily do split screens, or half and half.
Mm-hmm.
So I might eventually go two, but yeah, for now one's been working pretty good. So
Depends on your personality type, people. And
if your child
one
has
is
ADD,
cheaper.
then consider one.
Yeah. For me,
It's
I like to see everything that's open. So it's like, okay, my music is here.
Mm.
My Discord is over here where I talk to people. I'm recording this or I'm doing a video chat and my camera's up here. And then, oh goodness, we didn't even talk about cameras, but whatever. That's another day. And then,
Another day.
yeah, and then I have like a web page open over here. And so for me, it's nice to do that. But yeah, and then a case is not necessarily needed, but for most people it is. And when you're looking for a case, the size matters because sometimes graphics cards will or won't be able to fit in a case. And you're going to want to focus on breathability and what ports are on the front. And that's basically it. Cases aren't that
Well,
expensive.
one more thing, and that is we gotta give a shout out to the website that made all of this possible,
Oh, yeah.
PC Part Picker.
Yep.
If you're considering building a desktop, there is no way around it. You need to go to PCPartPicker.com. That's what it's called, right?
Yeah, that's right. No, I'm just
Okay,
laughing
just making
because
sure
it
I got
sounds
it
like a
right.
sponsor, but it's not.
Hey, it can be a sponsor. I don't even care. And they're probably making tons of money because
Oh, right now they are.
everyone that's building a desktop uses PC Part Picker.
Well, they're also doing some charity work, drilling wells in Africa. So they're
I mean, heck, go support them.
yeah, go
Go
support them.
But PC
And
Part
it's
Picker is
free.
nice because it's free. It lists compatibility. It's just all around, um, just an awesome tool, and really simplifies. You can order everything off Amazon. I mean, it's just so simple um, to get what you want on PC Part Picker.
And
So
I
and you can it also shows the total price, so you can we were talking about building a $200 computer. You would definitely need to analyze your build before you do that. So
and some things that are great is, let's say you want to build a computer, you're going to get better performance for less money. You're into that, but you're like, I don't want to spend all the effort trying to do the compatibility checks and all of this other stuff and adding one piece at a time. There are pre-built guides that basically say, hey, just add all of these to your Amazon cart and put it together. And that's literally
yeah,
all you need to do. So there's one right here. It's called Modest Intel Gaming Build, and it's 700. And so then you could just click on that, add them all to cart, and you're done. And then when it comes, you put it together. And someone else has already built this. Now,
yeah.
and yeah,
Alternatively,
so
yeah, I was just gonna say I mentioned it at the beginning of the podcast. We don't highly recommend the 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 typical companies, Dell, HP, but you can get some pretty good products from these companies as well. They build desktops, they put out stuff. If you don't want to put it together and you're worried about compatibility, you're worried about where this wire goes or that wire goes, you don't want a challenge for your child, heck, just shoot over to one of these builders and get it done. And there are also people who are like smaller builders who I don't know any off the top of my head, but like
I buy
Power
power.
iBuyPower, that's the one I was thinking of. So like iBuyPower might be one that you might look at. These are like kind of more independent builders, but they put together nice machines as well. So, James, I think we should wrap it up. This is
That's
probably our
it.
longest podcast yet. So let's.
Not well, not almost. It's like tied. It's tied.
All right.
Well, thank you so much for
Sounds
being
good.
with us.
Thanks, everyone.
Next week, we are going to have a Magic Charm on the podcast. So I'm very
Magic
excited.
Charm.
Yeah, to invite them, and we'll tell you all about them next time. Until next time,
Hasta la vista.
bye.
All right, I'll stop my recording here.